After my mother passed away, every time I'm home alone, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law always come over. It's crazy that you don't entertain us when we've gone out of our way to come here. No choice then. I'll order some delivery now. You'll pay for it, won't you? Sarah, the sister-in-law, is there too, laughing loudly as if she finds something amusing. This painful routine has been going on for 2 years now. My son and daughter have left home to attend university in the city, leaving just my husband and me at home. Then one day, my husband, Tony, told me something unbelievable. Next week, my parents and sister's family are moving in, so clean up your room. He even went as far as to say I should leave because I was in the way. This is originally my house. I have no reason to leave. I immediately decided to take action. Okay, I'll tidy up properly. When I said that, Tony had a malicious smile. He left for a business trip, not knowing anything. I immediately made the necessary calls to proceed with my plan. Before Tony returned, I had everything ready and left the house. I imagined Tony's surprised face when he would come back. My name is Nikki. I'm 48 years old, living as a housewife in my family home in the countryside after getting married. After high school, I moved to NY for university and stayed there to work and live a single life. However, during a visit back home, I ended up participating in a matchmaking event for local revitalization. I had no intention of returning to the countryside, but the locals persuaded me, and I couldn't refuse due to my personality of not being able to say no. Reluctantly, I attended, and the local men, starved for a romantic encounter, looked at me as if I were prey. Among them, there was a man quietly sitting beside me. He was my Tony, my husband now. Feeling awkward sitting alone, I casually started to talk to him, and he returned the favor. Despite his few words, his sincerity slowly attracted me. I had no boyfriend at the time and wasn't in a high position at my company. My father had passed away, and I had no siblings. My mother lived alone then. Tired of life in NY, I started feeling that staying in the countryside and getting married might not be a bad idea. Eventually, I married Tony and moved back to the countryside to live in my parents' home. Tony happily agreed to live with my mother since his sister, Sarah, was already living with her husband in his parents' home. We had a son and a daughter, and our married life seemed smooth. However, after my mother died and the children left home for university, I faced unexpected difficulties. Tony was always a man of few words and didn't talk much at home even after marriage. He didn't get involved much in parenting unless necessary. It might be considered calm, but that was his personality. I was an only child and very close to my mother, discussing everything with her. So I think I managed parenting ideally with her help. However, this ideal life changed drastically right after my mother passed away. Taking care of the family was my mother's greatest joy. So when the children left for university, she quickly lost her will and soon left this world. After my mother's death, I was left with just Tony, and I thought we would have a peaceful life. But Tony had changed completely after that. He started calling me you or hey, not my name. He also began acting arrogantly, a stark contrast to his previously quiet demeanor. Hey you, if you're not doing anything, at least make some coffee or something. He says this as he lounges in the living room every day, making a fool of me. He never used to lie down outside the bedroom. I wonder what changed him. Maybe he was being considerate of my mother, his mother-in-law. His current arrogant and haughty attitude is something I've never seen before. Perhaps having been considerate of my mother, he's now spreading his wings. But this drastic change has surprised me. Even our children, who occasionally come home, were shocked by the change in him. Moreover, even when the children are home after a long time, he's so engrossed in the TV that he doesn't move from the living room. What's more, when the children try to change the TV channel, he snaps. Hey, what are you doing? Go away. This attitude clearly upset the children. Since our home was mostly just me and my mother, it must be uncomfortable for them to see their father, Tony, behaving so boldly. As a result, our children, who initially came home often, stopped coming except for Christmas holidays. Finally, having reached my limit, I gently asked him, hey, what's gotten into you lately? You used to be more calm. What do you mean, what's gotten into me? You seem always on edge. Since around the time Mom passed away, Tony glared at me sharply. I was being considerate because she was your mother. It's natural. But now that she's gone, I'm the head of this house. It's normal to get angry if something displeases me. Tony answered grumpily, his face scarier than I'd ever seen. And I involuntarily stepped back. It seemed sure that the stress of accommodating my mother was the cause, but I never imagined Tony could change so much. Since then, I've had to be extremely cautious in how I deal with him. My hard time since my mother's death didn't end there. I work part-time until 3 p.m. and then do household chores when I get home. When my mother was alive, we used to enjoy tea time together during that time. Now that time feels very gloomy. When I get home, my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law are waiting at the entrance. "Oh, Nikki, you're quite late. We've been waiting outside in the cold for 30 minutes. "Yes, Nikki. I heard you finish work at 3, so we came at that time." "Why are you so late?" "Yes, these two know I finish my part-time job at 3 and come to my house every day at this time." In my husband's parents' home, his parents and his sister's family live together. Sarah, my sister-in-law, changed her last name to Timpson when she married, but her husband lives with her in her parents' house. Sarah, who has no children and has never worked, was close to my mother-in-law. When my mother was alive, I thought my mother-in-law and Sarah were kind. But as soon as my mother passed away, they started throwing harsh words at me. "I'm sorry I'm late. I was shopping." That's all I could say. If I show them a bad face, I don't know what criticism I'll receive later, so I apologize honestly. In this situation, I always have to invite them into my house. As soon as I get home, I have to organize the shopping and change clothes. But my mother-in-law immediately starts to complain without giving me time to wait. "Your husband's mother and sister have gone out of their way to come here, and you're not even doing anything to us. That's just crazy. I guess there's no choice. I'll order delivery now. You'll pay for us, okay?" Sarah laughs out loud next to me, finding something amusing. And as always, I'm the one who has to pay. This continuous pain has been going on for 2 years now. I've even talked to my husband about it, but he never helps me. Mom and sister are just trying to be nice because they think you're sad about losing your mom. It's not good to complain, but I'm always the one paying for their deliveries every time. That's why we're in the red every month. You could just manage our incomes better. Why not look for a part-time job that pays more? Besides, you care about your own family but seem cold towards mine. My husband's words left me speechless. I don't want to quit my current part-time job because the coworkers are nice. And it's true that I live in my parents' house, but I've never neglected my in-laws. I've attended gatherings with my husband's relatives and even brought gifts directly to my in-laws for birthdays and anniversaries. They used to be kind to me, but why did their attitude change so suddenly after my mother's death? I don't know how to handle this and just feel more stressed. It was amid these difficult days, something shocking happened. One night, after returning from work, my husband suddenly started, "Next week, my parents and sister's family are moving in, so clear out your room." What? That's so sudden. I'm confused and panicky. "They're moving in this Saturday. Get ready quickly." He says this without a care for my bewildered state. There were only 3 days left until Saturday. This important decision was made without consulting me, just decided by him and his family. Wait a minute, you can't just decide something so important on your own. This is originally my house. Shut up. I have decided to do it because I'm the head of this house now. Don't complain. His unreasonable attitude leaves me stunned, and I accidentally dropped a dish I was washing, shattering it. "You're really clumsy. That's why it's become a hassle to be with you." "What do you mean?" His words catch me off guard. To this, he responds sarcastically. "Let me be clear since it is a great time to say. My mom and sister like this house and want to live here, but they don't like you. I don't want to be with you either, so you should leave." Yeah, so like I said, pack up all your stuff. I'm on a business trip for the next 3 days, so finish it before then. What a horrible treatment. Filled with anger, I resolve to take a certain action immediately. Then I'll really pack everything up. Hearing this, my husband smirks nastily. "How I thought you'd resist more. But you're surprisingly obedient." He seems pleased that his plan is going well. He doesn't know yet about the payback I'm planning against him. The next day, oblivious, my husband leaves for his business trip. I followed the plan and immediately made a phone call to action with the necessary procedures. I finished all the preparations and left the house before Tony got home. While leaving, I imagined the surprised look on Tony's face when he returned. My destination was my daughter Lily's apartment in NY, where she lives alone. I had informed her 3 nights ago. "Mom, I've been waiting. Are you done with the procedures?" Lily asked. "Yes, everything is perfect. Sorry for coming over so suddenly." I hugged her and replied, "It's okay. Besides, Dad's way of doing things is terrible. Trying to kick you out of the house just like that," she said. "Well, before I came here, I got back at him. He's going to be surprised later." I responded, and we both laughed. My visit to Lily's was part of a plan. Later that night, as expected, Tony called. "What kind of joke is this? There's nothing in the house. Where did all the furniture and appliances go?" he asked. "Didn't you say to clear out all my things?" I replied, I meant to clear out the stuff in your room, not everything in the house, he exclaimed. Indeed, initially, Tony had said to clear out my room, but after telling me to leave, he changed his tune to getting rid of all my belongings. You wanted me to leave, right? So I got rid of all my furniture and appliances that I inherited from my mother. Now your family can move in without any hesitation, I told him. The procedures I had carried out over these 3 days started with having a recycling company take away the furniture and appliances. I had movers transfer our children's things and my belongings to Lily's flat. It was a bother for Lily, but she was interested in getting back at him and helped me. After a moment of silence, Tony began speaking in a confused tone. Actually, the story about my parents' and sister's family moving in was made up. Both my mother and sister are on the verge of divorce, he said. So they plan to take refuge at your place, I calmly responded. You're not surprised that my mother and sister might get divorced? He asked with a little upset. Because I already knew about it. I said, what? He exclaimed in surprise. Over these 3 days, I had been in contact with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law, Robert. So I was fully aware of the situation in my in-laws' family. Robert, originally from NY, had attended a matchmaking event in my hometown, which I also participated in. He was apparently interested and attended, where he was smitten by Sarah and under strong persuasion from her mother, ended up marrying her. After their marriage, Sarah and her mother repeatedly acted selfishly. Sarah was pampered by my mother-in-law, causing Robert much trouble. Since they started coming to my house every day, Sarah stopped preparing dinner. Indeed, if they ate so much at my house, they wouldn't need dinner. This went on for 2 years until an angry father-in-law ordered my mother-in-law and Sarah to leave their house. When I heard this from Robert, I felt good. So when Tony learned that his mother and Sarah were about to be kicked out of the house, he decided to welcome them into our home. By the way, when Tony said he was on a business trip, he actually went to ask his father to forgive his mom and sister. However, since his father did not agree, it seems he reluctantly helped them pack their belongings. The mother-in-law and sister-in-law were planning to move to our house with only the bare minimum of their belongings, so it would be quite troublesome without furniture or appliances. When I told Tony what I had heard from Robert, I heard a voice from the other end of the phone saying, well, that's a cunning wife. It seems the mother-in-law had been eavesdropping on the conversation. Nikki, what should we do with this? How are we supposed to live in a house with nothing? Exactly. And it's terrible for you to contact my husband without permission, Sarah added. It seems she was there too. Everyone seems to be in trouble. Actually, I also asked your husband for help. I asked him to forgive the two of you. He said that if you properly reflect overnight, you can come back tomorrow. Really? Sarah and the mother-in-law seemed to be rejoicing together. I could visualize them jumping up and down, holding hands. Nikki, let's forget about earlier. You're not so bad after all. Tony, who had brought the 2 women home, looked disappointed. So, the issue with the 2 of them is resolved. But what about me? At least return our home appliances. Oh, about that. While I was cleaning things up, I also completed the procedures to sell the house. So, could you please leave soon? What? Wait a minute, Tony exclaimed in surprise. I'm your husband. How can you treat me like this, doing whatever you want? But you tried to kick me, means your wife, out of the house, right? That was pretty terrible too. Tony seemed at a loss for words to my counter-argument. I added, oh yes, your belongings are still in the house. Check the small drawer in the bedroom. I've already filled out my part, so make sure you do yours. Hearing this, I could hear Tony's footsteps on the other end of the phone. He must be heading to the bedroom. After the sound of a door slamming and whistling, Tony said, what? These are copies of the petition marriage and the summons? Yes. Can you fill out your part and submit the response to the court? This is a joke. Why do I have to get divorced? Because you said you wanted me to leave, right? That's pretty much the same as breaking up. He probably never imagined that the seed he sowed would bear fruit in this way. Silence followed, and after a while, I could hear Tony crying. He pleaded in a tearful voice. Please, I was wrong. I will cherish you from now on. Can't we start over? Please, I want you to believe me. I could hear Tony's feeble voice, but I couldn't forgive his actions of prioritizing his family over me and trying to kick me out of the house. I didn't mind accepting his mother and Sarah, but he should have at least discussed it with me. How could I trust a husband who prioritizes his mother and sister and tries to kick out his wife? So, even after hearing his apology, my mind did not change. The next morning, I got a call from Sarah. Nikki, you tricked me. When I got home, neither my father nor Robert were there, and the house has already been sold. I responded to the furious Sarah with a calm demeanor. I didn't tell a lie. I said you could return. But I never said your father and husband would be waiting at home. I could hear Sarah and her mother complaining about being deceived over the phone. Then, suddenly, her mother exclaimed, "How could this be?" I could guess the reason. They probably noticed the envelope in the mailbox and opened it. Inside the envelope was a letter from the father-in-law to the mother-in-law and Sarah, including a filled-out copy of the petition marriage and the summons. I had already heard the contents of the letter from the father-in-law. Fed up with his wife's selfishness, he had been considering moving to a care home alone. This incident prompted him to finally decide to sell the house. Robert, too, unable to tolerate Sarah's selfishness, had decided to divorce her and return to his parents in NY. "Nikki, do something. If this continues, we'll lose our house." "That's none of my business. Why don't you apologize to your husband? It might still be in time." I suggested that, but Sarah, who has too much pride, couldn't bring herself to apologize to anyone. I could hear Sarah sobbing and her mother's consoling words. Then, her mother, apparently grabbing the phone, yelled, "You wicked woman! How cruel!" Surprised by her sudden shout, I felt it was just a bluff. I calmly conveyed my final words. "Understood. Take care, mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Goodbye." I heard a voice saying, "Wait," from the phone, but I ignored it and ended the call. I had no intention of being further troubled by them. They blamed me to the end, despite their own selfish actions causing this situation. Soon, I would be divorcing my husband, making them practically strangers to me. There was no need to involve myself with him anymore. Since Tony was reluctant to divorce, I had to initiate legal proceedings through a lawyer. After a divorce mediation, we were finally able to officially divorce. Tony demanded half of the money earned from selling our house, but his request was denied as it was deemed not to be shared property. Now I have nowhere to live. How am I supposed to carry on living? Tony angrily confronted me after the trial, but the judge stopped him. Even as I saw Tony shrink in disappointment, I felt no sympathy. Maybe things would have been different if he had shown any guilt over the constant intrusions from his mother and Sarah. In the end, our marriage concluded in the worst possible way. Afterward, it seemed Tony, along with his divorced mother and Sarah, was looking for a new place to live. I heard from a local friend that the three of them were sleeping in the park using cardboard boxes. Initially, Tony reached out for help, but eventually, I stopped hearing from him, perhaps because his phone service was cut off. Over time, they apparently managed to move into an almost derelict flat on the edge of town. Tony is working to support them, but it must be tough taking care of his inexperienced mother and Sarah. Sarah, who is of working age, is not working, probably because of her pride. She seems to dislike following others' instructions, even if it means living in hardship. Recently, his mother and Sarah have been arguing loudly, causing a nuisance to the neighbors. My ex-mother-in-law is selfish and only thinks about herself. She seems to have no intention of working even under the current circumstances. It seems that Sarah is also nothing but a burden to the family. Tony seems fed up with staying at home with them, as he has been frequently gambling lately. Most of the money he earns seems to be disappearing into it. It's no longer my concern, but somehow I feel a sense of satisfaction when I hear about it. As for me, I'm now living a new life in NY. Just before the divorce, I had consulted with Robert, who had already divorced Sarah and returned to NY, about what to do with my life. Through his connection, I was able to work at a food-related company run by Robert's brother. Initially, I stayed at my daughter Mika's flat, but with Robert's help, I found a new place and now live alone in a small flat. I am deeply grateful for all the support I've received from Robert. We share similar painful experiences and have a lot in common, which brings us closer. Perhaps meeting at that matchmaking event was fate. Even though I live far away now, I always have my hometown in my heart. I was secretly worried that marriages would become less common and the local population would decrease. However, it seems that the young people are now using convenient dating apps, making matchmaking events unnecessary. I've heard that marriages through these apps are increasing in areas with fewer opportunities to meet people. Recently, there's been an increase in workers doing remote work and moving to rural areas in search of lower-cost housing. My friend told me that this trend is bringing more young people back to my hometown. I'm happy to see my hometown thriving. I also think about returning to my hometown someday and spending a peaceful retirement in the countryside, possibly with Robert, whom I've recently started dating with the possibility of remarriage in mind.